Welcome to the 11th video in this series. So the last video was, I think, quite a tough one. I don't know what you thought, but we got through it and we're able now effectively actually to run a race in terms of we can add a couple more CPU cars into here, and they should, as long as we start them off in the correct place, they should actually drive around at whatever speed they have set and you could race against them. What I'd like to do in this particular video is actually set them up so that they've got slightly different speeds and also make a countdown timer to sort of start the race. So we see a 3, 2, 1, and then the race starts. We'll start off by giving the computer cars a little bit of variable speed. So I'm going to select the CPU car here actually, because I'd like to see what we have on the right hand side. So we only have debug and waypoint distance, which is not really good, is it? So I'm going to open up the CPU car scene and open up the script. Okay, so we're going to export a couple of things here then. So we'll export a max top speed limit. And then we can export a minimum top speed limit as well. And we're not going to do any sanity checking of these. We're going to assume that what we put in the inspector is actually correct, so that min is less than max. And then for max by default, let's put something like 350. And for minimum by default, we can put maybe something like 300. And then what we'll do inside the ready is we can set the target speed to be equal something in this range. So we'll do randef range, and then we can take as the minimum the min top speed limit and the maximum then the max top speed limit. So go to distraction preview, so hopefully you can see that. So we've set up a sort of random target speed here. So now in the inspector, each of the individual cars that we have inside our race, we can set them up to have, hopefully, individual speeds. And in fact, let's check that out before doing anything else. So I'm going to go to track to 2D view and zoom in. What have we got and where? So the player car, move tool, let's move the player car a little bit closer. I'll select the CPU car as well, and I'll put that one here. So that's got the 350 and 300, so I'll leave that one. I'm going to duplicate that CPU car and put this one here. Now, what are we called as well? Player car is called Maisie, and so is a CPU car. That's not very good, is it? So I'm going to call the player car here Jabba, and I'll call CPU car 2 here. Let's call this one Flossie, shall I? And then we might as well do another one as well, because in the end we're always going to have 4. So I'll call this 4th one here Fred, why not? And also set a different colour as well. So quick loads, that one can be the blue one. And then CPU car 2 here, Flossie, can be, where are we? We'll do the green one here, Control-S to save. So the first one here, Maisie, it's 350, 300. So we'll set Flossie then maybe to have 320, and I'll do 250. And then, sorry about this, Fred, but you're going to be pretty slow. So we'll put you up to maybe 260 and 200. And Control-S to save. The player car has a max speed of 380. That should do. And something else I did notice when playing this as well is that the red dot was really, really big. So I'm going to go to the CPU car, select the target sprite, and actually change the scale here to 0.05. Okay, then go back to the track and select all 3 CPU cars, turn on debug on the right-hand side, and then the oil dropper, reset that to have some reasonable time as well. So what I'd like to do is run this. So having a look at this then, let's have a look at how they lap. So the different speeds are definitely taking effect. They'll be slightly random as well between the ranges, and also, cool, they're hitting the oil slicks as well. I do notice when they hit the oil slicks, they drive back to the current waypoint effectively that's been set. Oh, and one of them hit the edge there. That was really nice. But the effect is generally okay. Maybe we'll come back and take a look at that with the waypoint and the oil slick later on. But what we see on the screen now, I think, is pretty reasonable for developing most of the features of the game before we start jumping into the weeds of improving the AI. So press F8 to close that down, close down the output. Let's now make a countdown on here, because the final game, what we actually have is a countdown timer. When we enter a track, it starts counting down automatically. So 3, 2, 1, go, and the cars can then start driving. As it is at the moment, they set off instantly. So we'll go into script view. And what I'd like to do actually is go into the car class. So I'm going to open up the car class. Where are you? Here we are, car scene and the car.gd. Let's add another state in here called waiting. And we'll set the default state when a car first loads to not be driving, but to be waiting. And now inside the ready, what we'll do is we'll set the physics process immediately to false. So it's not actually going to do any processing, and it's in this waiting state. And it's going to wait there until its state is changed into driving. So let's find the change state function, which you can see on the left-hand side here. So I'll select that. Now what we want is another one in here, and we want the driving state. And here, when we change into the driving state, we're going to set the physics process to true. So now what should happen when we run the application is actually that they just stay basically still. And the reason for that is because we don't have any countdown to actually start the race. We need to change their state somehow. The oil dropper, by the way, is happy and running away. So I'll press F8 to close that down, close down the output. Let's work on a scene that we can actually have to count things down for us. And that's actually going to be a UI scene. So I'm going to make a new scene at the top here, user interface, and call this a countdown. Then do Control S to save, go into scenes, we'll make a new folder here, countdown, and save. So our countdown scene, it's going to 2D view, it's going to be pretty simple. We'll add in here a label, and then that can be, if you click at the top here, we can anchor that into the center of the screen. Our countdown will be in the center. By default, we can have the number 3 in there. We'll do alignments, horizontal and vertical center. Let's make some new label settings and go to the font. Make the font quite big here, maybe 72. We can load up the fonts that comes with the game, and the outline here, I'm going to really whack this up actually to about 9 pixels will do. And yeah, that looks okay for our number. So we're basically going to go 3, 2, 1, and then the race is going to start. So to do that, we'll make a timer, or we'll add a timer. Let's say it's going to be our countdown timer. The wait time is 1 second at the moment. We'll keep that on 1 second for now, but we will actually, to start the races quickly, want to change that later on, but we'll keep that to 1 second for now. We don't need one shot, and we don't need auto start. We'll start it from inside the code actually by pressing a key. And what we'll also do is let's add our first little bit of sound. Later on we have crash sounds and spin sounds and engine sounds and things, but we haven't got any sound yet at all. So let's add some in. So I'll select the root nodes and we can type audio into the nodes. And here we don't need positional audio for this. That's the audio stream player 2D. What we want is just the plain old audio stream player. And I'll change this, the name of this, to beep. Then on the right hand side for the stream, we can type 391650. That is this beep here from Jekka, I think it is. It's a really nice beep. It's Creative Commons 0, so free to use, which is really nice. So we can select that. And then the timer that we have on the right-hand side here, for this, we don't need one shot or auto start. Wait time 1 second will do. We'll actually configure that from a script. Visually, I think that's all we need for this. So let's select the root node. Then we can add a new script. Countdown looks good to me, so I hit create. Then what we can do at the top here is make a class name countdown. And then we're going to need the label, the timer, and the beep, actually. So we'll drag across these, and then we'll also export a wait time as well. So we'll export a new variable. We'll call this wait time, and that's going to be a float, and we'll set that by default to be equal to 1.0. Then inside the ready, what we can do is we can set that the timer.waitTime is equal to wait time. So the way things are going to work here is we're going to start the process of counting down off when we hit a key. So let's go to project settings, input map. We'll add a new action called start. I'll hit add, click the plus on the right hand side. And for me, that can be the key S to start, I think. And we want to capture this input. Now here we've kind of got what is a sort of a one-off input. It's not like a steady holding down of a key where we've got game input for the car. So we could use the built-in input functions for this, I think. And we're going to use the unhandled input here. This isn't a Godot input tutorial, but very, very briefly, Godot has a cascading swallowing of inputs from the top of your application as you look down into your application. That's designed to allow UIs to swallow inputs without you affecting the game underneath. So a typical example, imagine you've got a soldier wandering around and you can select your soldiers, but then you bring up a menu on top of the soldiers. If you click something on the menu, you don't want to select the soldier at the same time. So what Godot does is it sets events as handled unless you otherwise specify. And if an event is handled, then it won't propagate down through all of the nodes that are laid on top of each other. So generally what you'll do when you're handling input is you'll use the unhandled input unless you have a special reason to do so, and then you know that you're handling an event that wasn't needed to be handled by something else. Now just describing that sounds much more complicated than it actually is, but as I said, this isn't an input tutorial for Godot, so if you're not familiar with this, you can always look it up in the docs, otherwise just go with the flow with me. So what we want to do here is if we do have some input is we want to check whether the event that we have, so we've got events dots and is action pressed, whether our start has been pressed here. Now, if start has been pressed, we want to start our countdown. However, we only want this to happen once. So what we'll do is we'll make a little var here, and I'll call this started. That's going to be of type bool. And we can set the default value here to be false, and we want to make sure that we haven't started. So if not started and we've pressed start, then we want to start procedure, which I'll just type pass for now. What we're going to also do then is count down. So I'll make another variable, count. That can be an integer here, and we can set that equal to 3. We're going to count down from 3. And then down the bottom here, we don't need to process. We can write the functionality to deal with this countdown, which is pretty straightforward. A lot of ways to do this. So I'm going to do start race, I think. So the first thing we'll do is grab hold of our beep, and we will play an initial beep from our sound. Then we're going to invoke show on this UI, which reminds me, in the ready, we'll put hide. So initially, we're going to be hidden. We've got that 3 there. We don't want to see that initially. We want it to pop up when we start the race. So we'll see nothing, then we'll press S, and hopefully then we're going to start the race and we'll play a beep and have show. As I say that, let's actually invoke this here then, shall we? That's better. Also, once we start the race, what we want to do is we want to set started to be equal to true, so we don't allow multiple startings. And then last but not least, we can start our timer. So we'll get hold of our timer and do start. Then we need to hook ourselves up to the timeout event of the timer. So I'll select the timer, go to node, double click, connect ourselves up here. Wowzers, it's gone all the way down the bottom of there. That was my fault, not Godot's though, because I had a load of new lines. Then I'll make a little bit of space here. And the first thing to do here is decrement the count. So we'll do count, and that's mine is equal to 1. Then if the count that we have is equal to 0, that means that things are over. So actually what we want to do here, I'll type pass there, but that's actually the official race start. So we're going to notify anything that needs to know that the race is starting. And what we want to do for our own actual selves is Q3. We can get rid of this because we're not going to need it again. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll play our beep. So we'll do beep.play. And we want to update the label as well. Now I'm thinking about that actually. It might be that we don't always have 3 as a default text or something like that. So it's probably a good idea actually to update the label with a separate function here. So we'll do that above the start race. This can actually be, I think, a one-liner. So we can do update label. The return type here is void, colon, and we can just get the label dot and text is equal to, and we'll do %d and then percentage and whatever count is remaining. Then we can invoke actually the update label immediately inside the ready here. So we've got the right number if it's not a 3, if we've set something else by default in some way, and then we'll invoke the update label also down the bottom here when we play this beep. That should be everything we need to do apart from emitting the race start signal to tell everything else it's started. I'm just looking at this because we've got the beep play here and the beep play here and timer start, and I don't think this is the absolutely best structure of code ever, but it's a bit of a throwaway scene with a countdown. So if it's okay with you, we'll leave it as it is. What we need to do though is emit a signal to tell other things in the game that the race has started, in this case the cars. So let's find our events hub, here it is. And wow, we've only got one signal in there. Okay. And here we can have a new signal called on race start. So anything else in the game that needs to know about the race starting, we don't need to do any of this type coupling or finding things with groups. We can simply just emit our signal in this way. So emit on race start, that will be a void. Then we can get on race start dot and emit. Then we can go back into the countdown.gd. I'll go back there very quickly. I was really too quick with that. So we've got on race start here as a signal, and then we've got the function to emit it. And then we can go back into the countdown.gd. And here, instead of the handy text there, we can do event hub dot and emit on race start. And now anything connected up to this knows that the race is started, so it can do whatever it needs to do. In our case at the moment, the whatever is on the cars, because the cars need to be able to drive. So I'll open up the car scene, open up the car.gd. So let's scroll up into the ready. So here what we want to do is hook ourselves up to this race start signal. So we'll write ourselves, I think above the process actually, because it's connected really to the ready, the on race start. And as soon as the race has started, we're going to change state to car state driving. Then last but not least, we can hook this up to our event hub. So we'll get hold of our event hub dot and on race start dot connect and on race start. And then finally, we can go back to the track. I'll go to 2D view. We want to add this UI onto our track. So I'm going to minimize what are turning into quite a few nodes here. Let's select the root node and we'll add ourselves for our UI a separate canvas layer that can go on top. And I'll call this UI canvas. And then as a child of this, we'll add our UI, which is down the list in the middle here. So countdown. So we can see it in the middle here. Now don't worry about it being visible. We've set it up to hide itself straight away. So all that remains actually then is to test this with a drum roll. So let's see, press S. Oh, here's some beeps. Good. Excellent. And please start. Yeah, they do. Cool. And I can start as well. That's really good. Okay, so I'll press F8 to close that down. I just want to try one more thing here. Can I drive without? No, I can't. I'm pressing and I can't drive and I still can't drive. And now can I drive here? Yes. Okay, cool. Excellent. That's really good. So I'll press F8 to close that down, close down the output. So a little bit of a more relaxed video. I think that one, relatively simple stuff. What we'll move on to next is putting a bit more control into the race. We've got the cars lapping, able to start the race. We need now to record how many laps they've done and then be able to do a race over when somebody's actually won the race.